doomed planet. You know, our planet is doomed. In a few billion years, the sun will explode and destroy Earth. But humanity is not doomed. And it's not doomed in the Bezosian sense, where Homo sapiens will be saved because they will labor in flying tubes in space. Or, well, humans are goners, but our thoughts and our expressions, our art, our podcasts will continue flying through the universe forever. This is episode 4 of the Doomed Planet podcast. Homeless hijinks with Three Finger Jack and Ace Backwords. I am your host, Alex. Billions of years from now, you will be listening to this, whoever you are. If you have been following along, you know that this podcast is a work in progress, and it's starting to gel around a Seattle true crime theme. You know, as long as there have been human beings in this area, there has been crime. Some of the native tribes practiced slavery, for example. Once the East Coast capitalists got here and stole the land from the Aboriginals who had somehow survived the European diseases that preceded them, it was time for crime. Which brings us to not a criminal necessarily, unless our society considers poverty and homelessness to be a crime, which it does. So yes, criminal Three Finger Jack.
Fuck you and your camera and your goddamn documentary. A cockumentary. A cockumentary is what it is.
Jack Hanover Miller died on July 27th, 2013. Considered him a friend, but obviously I exploited him. If you know of the musician Wesley Willis, it was sort of that relationship, but not quite as sick and without the horrible racial dynamic. Wesley Willis was this big, giant guy who was a schizophrenic, and he had this big scar on his forehead because when he met you, he would headbutt you. And anyway, he had this band, this killer backup band, and his songs consisted of him chanting these mantras over and over again, like, Dave Grohl, you know, while the power trio pumped out some rock in the background. He died, and, Jack died. I used him in my video projects, and so it was kind of like exploiting the homeless in a way. For some time, he lived in a storage shed in Tacoma. He was also the world's worst musician. The fireworks accident didn't help. So you could do a whole podcast series or mini-series or documentary series about Three Finger Jack, but for this episode, which is kind of a tribute to our dead friend, he died of a heart attack. He was alone in Tacoma at a hospital. We're just going to use the source material from this book, The Chronicles of Three Finger Jack, A Life Cut Short. The lightly fabricated tale of Seattle's most liked street busker, cult video personality, and bullshit artist. And I feel free to just use as much of this material as I want because I wrote this book with a friend, my ghostwriter, George. The pseudonym we used is Mills Rackley. And we're just going to go through it now. During the latter part of the 20th century and well into the one in which we currently wend our way, Three Finger Jack Miller was the Pacific Northwest's most liked street busker, cult video personality, and all-around bullshit artist. But he was so much more, if that's possible. Query: can a man who is not a Microsoft billionaire imbue an ambitious Northwestern town with his nature? Answer: yes, as it turns out. Three Finger Jack, rogue, t-shirt wearer, man about town and pretender, gamester in his way, having a bit of a laugh at our expense, beer fan, massive fuck-up, and song stylist ordinaire. Surely he was and is the embodiment of Seattle in the time of Amazon. Even now he inspirits many a gritty downtown street corner, the corner of First and Pike perhaps, slated for collapse due to groundwater displacement as a result of the Highway 99 tunneling project, but until then, thrumming with life. The kind of life Jack taught us to live, by singing his song, by sporting his psychedelic tea, by telling his preposterous tale, by putting us in an Emerald City state of mind. Chapter 1. Blame It on the Punk. The sun was high and well along its way, and warm, the sort of warm sun by which Jack Hanover Miller, given his druthers and rubbing his eyes, liked to greet his day. And greet it he did with a stentorian yawn. He wiped a little drool off his arm, ruffled the cat, and smiled, for he, too, was high, on that dangerous dope called love of life. And a couple of hours later he rolls off his cot and pulls on a pair of bikini briefs. What is that fucking sound? Someone had left the Zenith going, and a soap opera was hard at it, the kind of radio show he'd never taken to. Life is weird enough, without someone else's made-up troubles. He kicked it quiet. On the screen porch, Daddy Jack was passed out over the settee. Jack tucked into a wedge of last night's cheese pizza, and looked to wash it down. Last night's beer? Flat Highlander. No, Flat Highlander Pale. Ugh. To his infinite credit, even the young Jack, the wiser-than-his-years Jack, had beer standards. He found his flip-flops, and then it was outside, brightly into the afternoon air. Ah, summer! Stretch, scratch, startle the chickens with a rowdy belch. He went over by the stump, and there were a couple of canvas haversacks, a gallimaufry of dry probes, packing tamps and reamers, tools of the pyrotechnical trade. Seemed Daddy had been working into the wee hours making fizz-bangs, howlapaloozas, and other holiday verbotens to sell at the Bozeman Boom City. Looked like a healthy harvest thus far, so plenty of dough fritters this fall. Ow, bitey ants! Teeth like the devil's tongs, the hateful bane of rural America. I probably should put on pants. Stomp. He killed a company of them, and then another, only stirring the rest to action, for that is their way. He pulled a hot punk from the coals of last night's campfire and began to douse the little Nazis by way of its glowing teats. Psst, psst, ha ha, tss. Okay, that last one was on his calf. Say, how would a bitey ant blow up? Would it blow up well? Probably. He grabbed one of his pop's trout bombs and steered one of the little shits onto it in order to test his theory. Kablam! And he began to scream. Daddy Jack was out the door like a dart. He hurried his only son into the blue Packard for the dash down to Missoula. The good and caring people in the ER plied the injuries with all the right swaddles, and when Jack was mended in the best way that science could do, a nurse took Daddy Jack over a couple of feet and was curious why an unattended 5-year-old had been allowed to play with explosives. Daddy Jack could no longer do the old laser stare because one eye was glass. Now he carefully slipped in his dentures. Miss, he squinted, Miss Louise? You know, that's a family name of ours, Jack's mom, on her side. I'm sure you're not related. The name is commonplace. But it is interesting, isn't it? The coincidences that can derive from a chance meeting. Miss Louise, during those times when you are doing your important work, lancing boils, irrigating bleeding gums, and all those other processes that encompass your daily hygiene and self-maintenance, you will have noticed that I'm never at your shoulder, opining all the while. Amongst other reasons, such as apathy, other things to do, and a tender stomach, it's simply a matter of politeness. Yet here you are, with the foolish courage to kibitz on a matter entirely unknown to you. How to be a loving dad to Jack Hanover Miller, and all he will become. Well, I've enjoyed our chat, and now I will bundle my boy back home to the warmth of enfolding arms. Oh, and as to the digits that concern you so, here he handed them over. I encourage you, in fact, I implore you, to put them in a place where, in most people, the sun don't shine. And that's the story of how Jack became Three-Finger Jack. Okay, if you haven't caught on here, that is fiction. I never asked Jack the details about how he lost a couple fingers. He said it was a fireworks accident. We embellished that a bit, for entertainment's sake. So let us continue. So we did get Jack's death certificate and also a copy of his yearbook, The Bitter Root. 1954. And that's Missoula County High School in Missoula, Montana, that would later be called Hellgate High. The years at Hellgate High were a shining time for Three Finger Jack, a revelatory time that saw the young rowdy and sometime roustabout blossom to become a scholar, mentor, and athlete, a swain and able ladies' man, the kid who knew how to stay out of trouble, an entertainer without peer. Jack's name was emblazoned on all the Hellgate honor roll all 4 years of his tenure, creditable for anyone but especially for one not raised in an academic home. In particular, his presence in the auto shop and wood shop was deemed a calming and cautionary one, for which instructors gave him high marks, although he was not allowed near the tools. As squad leader of the Digitaires, a shadow puppet team that performed at various glee events, Three Finger Jack, entertainer. The lasting and most telling part of Jack's years at Hellgate High has to do with his newfound gift for minstrelsy. It seemed that somewhere along his travels he had pleased the muse of song, for his voice was a light and golden one, in some parts frolicsome and wry, in others world-weary, because he'd had his fingers blown off. He joined the Spartanaires, a school song troupe, and led them to great things, tops in the state 2 times, all Northwest Chorus, 1953, a Heldon tenor, they called him, of a clear and knowing tone, and many were the times, sport rallies and post-match ceremonials, that young Jack was called upon by broad acclaim to render the Hellgate fight song, ever to a reverent hush. Kill them, Hellgate, O Hellgate! Trembling foes are trampled down. We a bloody path will make, clap, clap, from Bitterroot to Puget Sound. So with a guitar, a bit of luck, and a lot of learning, Three Finger Jack would meet his dream of becoming a big city street busker someday. That's according to our book, but not to any actual information. It's all been fakery up to this point, but that will change. We'll go from fiction into some harsh, stark non-fiction. Years later, after Jack's personal path had led him from Bitterroot to Puget Sound, there were some who wondered how it was that, in a region known for nurturing great guitarists, Three Finger Jack became the worst guitarist of all time. The fact that he doesn't have all his fingers would give him a head start. And his guitar only had 4 strings, so there's that. The worst guitarist of all time was also sort of a savant. Music sounds stupid, but it's actually complicated, said Jack. First you've got your notes, which are demi-semiquavers, and they go in a particular order and can go flat or sharp, depending. Eventually that establishes your tempo, and when that's done, you add your tone, chords, of course, but also chord changes, also guitar chords. There's always a certain amount of volume, pitch, tuning, meter. He shook his head. There's just an awful lot you have to get wrong. So we're talking about Three Finger Jack and reading through the Chronicles of Three Finger Jack, which is an e-book. Here's where we reveal that Doomed Planet, which is now a podcast, started out as a video featuring Three Finger Jack. And that came out in 2000. About halfway through production, Alex had another request. Seems there was a busker in downtown Seattle calling himself Three Finger Jack, who looked exactly like the Grateful Dead's Jerry Garcia. Could I write a part for Jerry Garcia? This is the screenwriter of Doomed Planet talking. I said I would be honored to write a part for the late Toonsmith who had given so much joy to so many others. Alex added that he was scared of Jack because he, Jack, had attacked him and demanded beer. And anyway, since I was the only one on the production team who had a car, I would have to go collect the elusive street musician, and I also would be providing beer. I loved an assigned task. Done and done. The next day we were there in Alex's rent-stabilized apartment. Jack recounted his tale of the dream. Alex listening with that look on his face that said he'd made a very bad decision and now would have to live with the consequences. So, no particular reaction. The scene was a simple one. Location was Alex's kitchen. I was in charge of lighting, cinematography, microphone. Places, I said, Jack winked at Alex. It's magic time. He took position. Here it is from the original screenplay. Interior, empty studio, night, narrator. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jerry Garcia, with an important message for today's young people. Jerry Garcia walks into the frame, faces camera. Jerry Garcia. Reading from cue cards. Hey everybody! A few years ago I died of a heroin overdose. Then, because I'm basically a good guy, I went to heaven. Pretty sweet deal, right? Well, I got news for you people. There is no heroin in heaven. I am serious. It's the first thing I asked for when I got there. They looked at me like they didn't know what I was talking about. Yeah, right. Now I really regret dying when I did. I really miss my heroin. And then he walks off. Then the narrator comes in again. You think life sucks? No, death sucks. Use more heroin. Jack absolutely aced it, and then he dipped into the cooler for an ice-cold Stroh's. Helps with the post-traumatic stress, he said, chuckling. I know it took a lot of courage to laugh just then. An expert sip, then he took over the couch and described his life in great detail. Hellgate and Spartanaires, of course, and from there he would become a scrappy mix of University of Montana Grizz and Montana State Bobcat. Did you know the Three-Finger Jack was married once? Rosie Smith, or whatever became of her. And they had an issue, one son of which does time as a singer, even as I write this. We're not going to mention his name. He does have a son. A stint at Boeing's Renton shop, banging out 707s. He played his first pro gig in 1963 at the old O'Sullivan's in Coos Bay. And it was pretty much up and away from there. Tides Tavern of Gig Harbor, working as a one-man band. I'm just going to cut into the book here and say that Jack was a partner in the Tides Tavern of Gig Harbor. It's a beautiful place that exists to this day, and I think his partner that Jack claims screwed him over and might still be in his family. Rindondo Tavern, strumming a bit with a young Charlie Manson. That never happened, of course. Polishing his act at Berg's Inn in University Place, where he swapped yarns with a young Ted Bundy. He bought the Tides at one point and named it after himself, operating it successfully, and taking the stage every Friday and Saturday night until it failed in 1973. So, okay, that's coming back to me. The Tides Tavern was called Three-Finger Jack's. I actually have a photo of that. Then it was off to Seattle's Pike Place Market, Safeco and CenturyLink Fields, and even outside the historic Pantages Theater in Tacoma. I asked him about that other thing, and with nary a pause except for contemplation, he became Jack the Teller of Tales, the Jack of pure imagination, who knew that the best stories are the ones that aren't true. Well, there was this feral pig out back. They're endangered, right? If I'm not mistaken, and the thing is obviously hungry. So I reach out to give it one of my sausages, and I guess there was a misunderstanding. Animals sometimes played a part in Jack's origin myths, and the animals got meaner as the evening progressed. So at this mill, this saw blade comes off its truncheon. Normally I ignore it because that's life at the mill. What are you going to do, clean up after? But I see that it's headed right for this lost kitten. So I lunge out and smack the blade with a judo hand so it's deflected off into the rec room. Then I pick up the scared little guy and it bites off a couple of my fingers. Lesson: no good deed goes unpunished. Chapter 5 of the Chronicles of Three-Finger Jack. God help us, it's magic time. It would be unfair to call Three-Finger Jack a B-movie actor because the movies were more like C-, but actor he was, basically playing himself with a keen and practiced eye. I don't know anything about his life during this period, but my colleague Alex does, and he has generously agreed to provide an account and to consult his daily journals for this purpose, as well as copious mini DV and VHS tapes from his archives, and, of course, his inventive memory. Three Finger Jack lives forever in my shitty psychotronic videos by Alex. Three Finger Jack represents the old Seattle, a town of grit and hard characters. Today's prototypical Seattleite, a software engineer with smooth hands, would not have survived for 10 minutes in Jack's world. 77 hardscrabble years of grubby subsistence living and violent encounters with Ted Bundy, corrupt Tacoma vice cops, and space aliens? Not a safe place for the iPhone crowd. There were no sushi bars or guest chefs at the Boeing cafeteria back when Jack worked there in the mid-60s. Hot dogs, turkey, gravy if you're lucky. 1960s coffee. The days of employee massages and stock options and food trucks were decades away. No lattes, no marijuana delivery services. Grim. Jack claimed he was fired from Boeing for hitting his foreman in the face with a wrench after an argument over a porno magazine. No charges were filed. Later, he took over a quaint waterfront bar in Gig Harbor, a family place with ice cream sundaes and steaks and martinis for Grandpa, and he turned it into a hippie biker bar. That is absolutely true. For years after, Jack remained embittered about his experiences as owner of Three-Fingered Jack's Tides Tavern. A river of whiskey and too many late nights, and suddenly Three-Fingered Jack lost the place and became a drifter. For decades, Jack took the bus from Tacoma to Seattle to busk outside Mariners games. Returning home late at night to his crash pad, literally a broken van down by the river in a bad neighborhood. Or was it a storage shed adjacent to a pulp and paper mill? No matter. Never one to hold back an opinion, 3FJ once quietly told me that all these computer motherfuckers can take a look up their own ass while they go fuck themselves. They say you should do what you love, and Jack loved to do hard language. In 1998, we were making a video about warring cults called Doom Planet, and we needed a Jerry Garcia lookalike. My friend Taffy's girlfriend, who owned a vegan sandwich shop at the Pike Place Market, told me about Jack. By the way, she added brightly, you know nothing about cults. I explained to her that Doomed Planet was a work of fiction, with any luck, a comedy. She shrugged and said, the guy who kind of looks like Jerry Garcia has been at the market or on First Avenue lately. Now fuck off. So I did fuck off and then found Jack a few weeks later. He agreed to come over for his cameo as Jerry Garcia in the fake public service announcement warning kids about heroin. There will be beer, I said, hopefully. Jack's face did not resemble Jerry's in any way aside from the gray beard, but he had the props, a guitar and a tie-dyed t-shirt. A few days later, Three-Fingered Jack arrived and we sat him down with a glass of Evan Williams, my preferred cheap whiskey back then. He read his lines about the evils or possibly the merits of hard drugs. And we videoed him a bit, and then when he wouldn't leave, we made some excuse about having an appointment. And we ditched him at the Rendezvous Tavern, a place where, ironically, heroin was being sold in the bathrooms. That is all I remember of that day, thanks to my close personal friend, Evan. Doomed Planet, a cult film about cults with campy gore, SNL-influenced parodies of TV commercials, that kind of shit. I wanted it to be like The Groove Tube, my second favorite movie of all time, right after, predictably, They Live. Schlock is what I like. Remember how Charlie Brown's favorite baseball player was Joe Schlabotnik, the worst player ever? My favorite filmmaker at the time was Ray Dennis Steckler, a dude who makes Ed Wood look like Kubrick. The cast of Doom Planet was harvested from the employees of the Lusty Lady Peep Theater, local dive bars, and the Seattle music scene.
You fuckers just don't get it, do ya?
Suddenly, it was the year 2002, and we were making Hellhole High, another no-budget epic, this one about a reform school of terror. Jack would have a bigger part this time as the deranged music teacher. Now he would really have something to brag about. After Doomed Planet, that's something that Jack told everyone about, and he sold cassettes, and he always had a poster of himself in the movie when he was busking. Interior, Galaxico Studios, day. Three-Finger Jack, wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt, stands at the podium in front of the students of Hellhole High, Tiffany, Doink, and Billy. Hey students, how's it going? Are you ready to rock? Are you ready to learn about rock and roll? This wakes up Doink, who has been sleeping with his head on his desk. Yeah, man, that's the spirit. Now there's a real rocker, says Jack. Jack looks to Billy. Three-Finger Jack, what's your favorite band? Billy, I like classical music. Three-Finger Jack, that's a bunch of shit. Get the fuck out of here. Tiffany, I like Sinead O'Connor. Three-Finger Jack, yeah, you think that bald bitch can play like this? Jack grabs his guitar and plays it for a while, badly. Then he lights up a joint and inhales deeply. Three-Finger Jack, I'm here to teach you about music. Let's get back to the beginning. Jimi Hendrix released his first album in 1963. And then Jimmy played at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. I was there. I was high on 12 hits of Liquid Sunshine. I was the only one nude in the crowd. At this point, Jack picks up his guitar and begins playing furiously until two of his fingers fall off onto Doink's desk. He keeps playing as blood spurts out of his mutilated hand. Then he picks up his fingers and sticks them back onto his bloody fist. Fuck this shit, Jack says. You wouldn't know peace and love if it bit you on the ass.
What about the Grateful Dead? The Grateful Dead are the ultimate in music, man. You guys wouldn't know a Grateful Dead song from the Backstreet Boys Circle Jerk. Fuck you!
Okay, back to the book, The Chronicles of Three-Finger Jack. Before Jack died, he scored an even bigger part in the next, and it turns out final, Galaxico feature-length production, Paul Alien. It was originally titled Bill Gates for President. And we changed the name to Paul Alien after realizing that Paul Allen, Bill Gates' partner in Microsoft, was a more interesting target than his richer pal. Jack would again play himself, which is to say a version of himself that was a covert member of the anti-Paul Allen, anti-alien resistance.
You know who Three-Finger Jack is?
No, but it don't sound very pretty.
As part of the Paul Alien project, we arranged to have Jack perform at the Rendezvous Tavern on election night 2004. That was the night that Kerry and Edwards lost to Bush and Cheney. Scotty and Michelle Crane were part of the cast. Scotty is the son of TV and dinner theater legend Bob Crane of Hogan's Heroes fame. The script had Michelle pretend to have some kind of alien brainwash attack, and then we had her dragged out of the place onto the street by goons and Scotty. The acting was sharp in this scene, vivid. And again, Three-Finger Jack performed for real that night in the Rendezvous Jewel Box Theater. One of the bar's owners, Steve, watched Jack perform. "This is rough," he said with a grimace. Steve was the owner of Seattle's legendary OK Hotel. He's seen a lot of music. "This is the worst performer I have ever seen on a stage," Steve said. For the record, I made that up. I know Steve, and he might have said that, but we made that up because this book about Jack is fiction. And I will go further and say that Jack was not that interesting of a person. And so, although we had a relationship where I exploited him in return for beer, you gotta give me some credit for obsessing over him and kind of blowing up his legend here. Jack wanted to stay at my place after we were done shooting, so I put him on a bus to Tacoma.
Fuck you and your camera and your goddamn documentary. A cockumentary. A cockumentary is what it is.
So Jack's greatest performance was in Paul Alien, there's no doubt. He also had his biggest parts. Uninterestingly, there's a mainstream big budget Hollywood movie called Paul the Alien that makes it really hard to search for Paul Alien if you're looking for Jack, but he's out there. Jack continued busking after we stopped making those videos. He drank beer when he could at his favorite sports bar, which is called Sluggers. And he kept to himself. He never had health insurance. He was overweight most of his life. He could drink gallons of beer at a sitting. He hung out on the streets playing bad music and collecting enough money for bus fare, beer, and a stockpile of junk food. And he lived to be 76. I might have said 77 earlier in the podcast, but the death certificate says 76. That's a pretty good run. And, he lives on for eternity in Paul Alien, Doomed Planet, and Hellhole High. I think Jack had some trouble with branding. Maybe I should have helped him with that. The spelling, do you spell out 3 or just use the numeric 3 for Three Finger Jack? There are also lots more Three Finger Jacks out there. There is Three Finger Jack Mansong, perhaps the most feared runaway slave in Jamaica during the 1700s. Three Finger Jack Mansong was blamed for numerous murders, but popular legend had it that he did not harm women, children, or slaves, and in fact some writings suggest that Jack freed a number of slaves during his reign of terror. Three Finger Jack Mansong, historians say that he got the name Three Finger Jack after he lost 2 fingers in an ambush in which he attempted to rob a bounty hunter named Quashi. Quashi is said to have fought back and chopped off 2 of Jack's fingers, although he also was badly injured. Three Finger Jack White was a gangster in the 20s. He was involved in bootlegging, which I heartily approve of. Unfortunately, there's violence associated with that, and on January 23rd, 1934, his body was found slumped over a dresser drawer. He apparently was reaching for 2 pistols that were there. There had been a struggle after drinking with 2 other men. He was shot once in the body and once fatally in the head. There is a Three-Fingered Jack's Saloon, the oldest legal saloon in the state of Washington. There is a sadistic Japanese prison guard during World War II named Three-Finger Jack. I'm pretty sure there is a Three-Finger Jack Cabernet Sauvignon because there is a mountain named Three-Finger Jack on the West Coast. There was a Three-Finger Jack Stout from ratebeer.com. So as we wrap up our tribute to Jack, I'd like to mention that he was the one that wanted me to get Doomed Planet listed on the Internet Movie Database. And in the year 2000, that was a relatively new thing. And I had great difficulty convincing the people there that this project was an actual motion picture. And what I did, I don't know if I have these emails, but I said, I'm going to list all of the pornography that is listed here on the Internet Movie Database. It's extensive. It's almost ridiculous. And, our project really was a step up from most of the porn listed there, which I emphasize to these people. I'm speculating here, but I'm guessing this British guy that started the Internet Movie Database started it off by cataloging all the porn he watched. I mean, that really fits the explanation. Of course, he got bought out by Amazon and received some stock and is now one of the world's wealthiest people. So, porn sells. Jack is not on the Doomed Planet IMDb listing, but he is listed for Hellhole High and Paul Alien, and we'll wrap up our Three Finger Jack segment by reading his biography that he wrote for the Internet Movie Database. The one and only biological issue of the marriage of John Robert Lashley and Margaret Louise Hanover, Lost first joint thumb, first and second joints index finger, and tips of fourth and fifth fingers of the right hand in a gunpowder explosion on April 4th, 1948, on the University of Montana golf course, approximately where the Pro Shop sits today. With a backer, he kept the Tides Tavern in Gig Harbor from foreclosure and possible demolition by buying and operating it as Three Fingered Jack's Tides Tavern until he was forced out of business, again, this is Jack's own words, in April 1973. Played various clubs and had various day jobs until becoming a street musician at the Pike Place Market, Safeco Field, Seahawks Stadium in Seattle. Appeared as Jerry Garcia in Doomed Planet, the Way Out music teacher in Hellhole High, and the resistance leader in Paul Alien, 2005. Jack, you are dead in one sense, but in another way, you will live forever.
Crazy little women there, and I'm gonna get me one. Well, I'm walking with my baby, she got great big feet, long, lean, and lanky, nothing to eat. She's my baby, love her just the same.
Okay, so before we cover our bases by talking about Ace Backwords, who is a homeless cartoonist that lives in the hills of Berkeley, California, with a bunch of feral cats, we are going to do an advertisement for Amazon's Alexa. So we got a box in the mail. P.S. lightweight U.S. postage fees paid. So that's like bulk mail, I guess. And on the mailer side, it says, a little gift for your daily sip. Top of the box says, a little gift from yours truly, Amazon Alexa. And it has the Alexa logo of the bar that goes in a circle. On the other side of the box, it says, Alexa, order coffee, 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 5 times. Bottom of the box is just part of the black box and says nothing. The last side says, thanks a latte. Here's a little gift for your daily sip. So who doesn't want to get a little gift? We're going to unbox this thing here. It's shrink wrapped. And you open it up. I'm imagining it's some kind of coffee thing where they want you to order coffee through your smart home so that a drone will deliver you coffee. And it comes with some micro bubble wrap. So it's, oh God, it's a mug. It's a mug that's black, the plastic top, insulated coffee mug, and it says in silver metallic lettering, Alexa, order coffee. Rather small for one of those coffee mugs. And there's a little flyer inside. Simple, modern. It's a woman drinking from what is not this cup. There's some cactuses behind her. Our company is built on serving our customers, offering remarkable value, and giving generously to worthy causes. Mike Bumblebore, CEO. Actually, I need my glasses because this is in like 5-point type. So we will actually get back to that in a second because it's pretty funny. All right, I have my reading glasses on now. So this flyer from Simple Modern, which has created what just looks like your normal insulated coffee cup. Simple Modern is dedicated to creating long-lasting product. Our products are made from the highest quality materials that are crafted to perfection. If there's ever an issue with your product, please contact us at the email below. It's a generic, cheap coffee mug. Oh God, this is Anand Giridharadas would be horrified by this. Be known, and there's a stock photo of multiracial young people. We believe relationships are the most important aspect of life. Simple Modern products are crafted to be as unique as you are and designed to inspire community with others. Sharing a drink, engaging in conversations, and taking on adventures with new friends is a great way to do just that. Our hope is that each product we make will help you express yourself and be known. The second panel here, share generously, and it looks like two South Asian schoolboys with little ties, and they're wearing white gloves. We believe life is more meaningful when we give. This is the inspiration for our commitment to donate a minimum of 10% of our profits each year to helping others. Sharing generously is about more than just giving money. It's about serving people. As a company, we value volunteering. Our hope is to encourage you to find ways to personally help others in your own life. Okay, in the final panel here, there's a shot of a large group of young white people, young affluent-looking white people in casual summer attire. Redefine business. Simple Modern is based in Norman, Oklahoma, and was founded on the idea that business could be done differently. Our desire to inspire relationships, generosity, and excellence are the heartbeat of every decision we make. Simple Modern is 100% owned by its employees. We always put people above profits. You can find more information about our vision and giving at simplemodern.com. So if it is employee owned, I would be interested to know more, but this is a little repulsive and reeks of fakery, so I'm not going to bother to do more research. There's another flyer in here, a little smaller than a postcard. Again, we're reviewing the Alexa Order Coffee free coffee mug that we got. Fill it with your favorite. Just ask, Alexa, order coffee. A few more ways to simplify your routines with Alexa. Add caffeine to your shopping list. Just say, Alexa, add coffee to my list. Ordering the usual is easy. Simply say, Alexa, reorder coffee. There's more to know about your Joe. Just ask. Alexa, how long do coffee beans stay fresh? Amazon Alexa, and the logo. Alexa, I love you. Alive, girl.
I'm a person. They're gonna kill us all. I wish I was shorter, because they like people that are tall.
And now, Ace Backwords. Luckily for Ace, most of the time allotted for this show has been soaked up by Three Finger Jack. Ace, I think, is 63 years old, and he was a brilliant cartoonist. He also published a newsprint punk rock zine called Twisted Image from, I believe, 1982 to 1984, and interviewed all of the quite an interesting character thanks to the magic of Facebook, but we'll get to that. When I was involved in publishing zines, and this is before the commercial internet, it was a big thing. There was this whole scene, and Ace figured out that if he gave away his comics to whoever wanted to reprint them in whatever kind of shitty Xerox zine up to a real magazine, then that would make him more famous, and it did, and he's revered among cartoonists because he's just so damn funny. He could draw really well, too. So his comics are punk rock as fuck. Here's one from 1989. What if cartoon characters took drugs? You know, the typical parody of cartoon characters, but this is super funny. Dagweed. Mr. Dithers is haranguing Dagweed, who's smoking a joint. Dagweed, you worthless slug. You'll never amount to nothing sitting on your fat ass all day sucking up that Mary G. Wanna. Mellow out, my man. Don't blow your cool. I've had it with your shit, Dagweed. You're Oh, my heart. Ugh. Ugh. Bummer, man. Too much caffeine and nicotine. And then this other guy comes in. Congratulations, Dagweed. Since the boss kicked the bucket, you've been promoted to head of the company. And Dagweed says, dig it. To get ahead, you gotta feed your head. And then we have a Beetle Bailey parody called Edel Acid. Sarge is saying, what the fuck's the matter with Edel Acid? We gotta kill these gooks. It shows him like strangling and shooting a person with a Vietnamese hat on. He took too much LSD. See, he's freaking out. Here Sarge is getting his hand blown off and getting shot by those gooks. A beetle is sitting cross-legged with a peace sign on his helmet. And he's singing, picture yourself on a boat on a river. Then in the final frame, Sarge, of course, is kicking his ass, saying, Edel, don't you stupid shit. Don't you know drugs are dangerous? And of course, if you know the insipid comic character called Kathy, Ace did a parody called Cracky. Shows her smoking crack. What a rush, man. I've been up 3 days basing this gnarly shit. And then some gangsters come in and say, yo, Cracky, what you be messing with us, man? Muscling into our turf with your drug runners and shit. And Kathy goes, Ulp. Then she pulls out a machine gun and says, eat lead and die, you fucking Crips. Bam, 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 bam. And then another guy comes in and says, whoa, Cracky, you be the iciest bitch in the whole project. Damn straight, man. There are some troubling right-wing and weird aspects to Ace and even his comics from back in the day. He got in trouble parodying Art Spiegelman's Mouse. That's another cartoon parody called Mousefield. And in the final, we're not going to read that one, but in the final panel, John, the owner of Garfield, is shown pointing a gun at Mouse, and he's got the Nazi uniform on. So before we dive into the world of Ace Backwords on Facebook, I want to mention that at one time he was very prolific, and he was never about the money. I think he moved from New Jersey to California when he was young and might have always been homeless or intermittently homeless. From 1989 to 2004, he and his buddy Bruce Duncan produced a calendar called the Telegraph Avenue Street Calendar, and that showed homeless people. Bruce Duncan, you might have seen his stuff in Weirdo magazine, featuring his S&M fantasies. Pretty weird. And again, before the internet, when these underground types wanted to communicate, a lot of that was done through zines. There was a magazine called the Fact Sheet 5, published by Mike Gunderloy, that featured a listing of thousands and thousands of zines and how much they cost and what the address was, and people networked that way, and it was a great thing. And I exploited Ace for that because I published a bunch of that type of stuff, underground comics and whatnot, and I would always steal his stuff because that's what it was there for, and that helped perpetuate his underground street cred, although no one gets money from that. But if you think you're going to make money as a cartoonist, well, good luck. Maybe the Green New Deal will have some kind of provision for paying cartoonists. That would be great. So he did the street calendar. He also did a collection of his comics called Twisted Image, a big paperback full of all his brilliant, funny, hilarious comics. He did work for a porn magazine. I guess it was the Screw magazine of the San Francisco Bay Area. He did a comic called Sexley's Believe It or Not. And, a rip-off Ripley's Believe It or Not. And it's pretty graphic, also very funny. That book, Twisted Image, published by Lumpanics, that's another institution that the internet killed. As you may know, the Lumpanics catalog, published out of Port Townsend, Washington by Mike Hoy, published and sold the books that no one else would touch. We don't need to go into detail there, but how to make bombs, how to hide your identity, some vile racist stuff, all the stuff that the First Amendment protects. That's gone now because you can just do that on the internet. Another Lumpanics book The Art and Science of Dumpster Diving by John Hoffman that was illustrated by Ace. And really, he's a really good artist. And again, he stopped. I'm not sure when he stopped, but he does not draw. So we'll get to that in a second. Surviving on the Streets, How to Go Down Without Going Out. That was published in 2001. That's the one book of his that I don't have, also published by Lumpanics. So again, this guy has been homeless forever, and he's not getting any younger. So why did Ace Backwords stop drawing his brilliant cartoons? I mean, everyone burns out. Every artist is going to reach a point where they just can't squeeze out any more magic. What he claims is that he has glaucoma. And he also doesn't want to be interviewed. You know, his Facebook page, I don't know if it's public or not, but he broadcasts his life all day long. It's either reproductions from some of the work he did back when he was working as an artist, or just thoughts about the feral cats that he feeds and that he sleeps with, apparently, in the hills of Berkeley. Now, here's the thing. And it's funny, I made him draw a picture. I said, how do we know that you actually were Ace Backwords? And so he scrawled out a autograph on Facebook for me and took a photograph of it. But you know what? The glaucoma thing is a good explanation, but he spends all day on a tiny phone typing in on a tiny keyboard, reading tiny text. So Ace, I don't buy it, man. And I don't worry about him either. He is somewhat homeless, but he does have a storage area and he does have a source of income. He drinks, 80 or 100 ounces of bad malt liquor every night. So he has some kind of income. I don't know if SSI or something would pay enough for you to be able to have that lifestyle, but I don't know. It's a hard scrabble thing. I mean, this guy is not getting any younger. One great accomplishment of Ace's, that's before he stopped trying, was an interview with Charles Schulz. He wrote back when he was publishing his punk rock zine, Twisted Image, that became the comic strip. He wrote to Charles Schulz, I'm an aspiring cartoonist. Here's some of my work. What do I do? And Charles Schulz wrote back responding to all his questions, and then he published the thing. And that's a great thing, Ace. You got shortchanged by Three Finger Jack this episode, Ace. So we're going to wrap you up now. We're going to come back after this advertisement for, as Robert Evans of the Behind the Bastards podcast would say, products and services.
You know I love you, baby. And that's why it's time to get funky.
Hello, this is Alex, and we are back with some words about this podcast. Might seem a little hard scrabble and disjointed to our listeners. This is episode 4. We're learning as we go along. We have a formula, which is, Seattle true crime and biographies of interesting Pacific Northwest characters. Then we have a whole bunch of other sections that I can never seem to get to. And the long-range plan for this is, of course, to make the Wild World News podcast network into a series of shows. I can't do that alone, but come back in a year and see what we accomplished. So some of those sections that are going to be in the Doom Planet podcast and then eventually spin off into their own shows are Rusty the Media Watchdog, Podcast Shoutout, Facebook Peak, Condiment Vehicle, Green Diversions, Nirvana Walk, and, of course, Bezos Town. So one thing to keeps a good podcast going is the chemistry between the hosts and or whoever is being interviewed. And next week, we're going to have my friend Elaine on as the guest interviewee for Doomed Planet Episode 5, Seattle in the Not-So-Swinging 60s. Elaine was an eyewitness to those times, and it was not that swinging. It was a bunch of broke-ass hippies. No one wanted to come to Seattle. It was considered the fucking middle of nowhere. So we'll get to that, and it's going to be fun. And by that time, we're going to be up to speed. I was sick for an entire month, and I managed to produce 3 episodes. Our goal is to have a weekly episode. So the whole point of a podcast is that you subscribe, and then you feel good when you see that there's a new episode coming up and you feel like you have some kind of kinship or something in common with the people producing these podcasts. So we're recording these in advance, but eventually we're going to get more topical. The decade of the 20s is going to be ugly, and we want to be able to respond to events as they happen. I do want to mention that as we wrap up this episode, a socialist has retained her seat on the Seattle City Council despite the fact that Amazon donated $500,000 to see that she was defeated and another $1 million to promote their pro-Chamber of Commerce, pro-business lackeys that they wanted to win. I kind of consider myself to be a member of the DSA right now. We'll get to that. Oh shit, I forgot. We always have to have an obituary. Even if we don't cover all these other dumb sections about marijuana and shit that we never get to. And the obituary this time around would be for Karl Krogstad, Seattle filmmaker. So I knew Karl for decades. He was always a supporter of my work. He never had anything bad to say about anybody. Everybody liked the guy. And his obituary just appeared in the Seattle Times. So I'm going to read the obituary and be honest about what I know about the actual facts. Because Karl was, like many of his boomer generation of Seattle artists, a complete scam artist. From the Seattle Times, Karl Krogstad, a prolific local independent filmmaker and painter who had a strong following in Seattle and beyond, died October 27th, 2019. He was 71. Mr. Krogstad made more than 60 films, a mix of short works and features, during a half-century of non-stop creative activity. Many of those films are unfinished. Most of them were short. Some of them barely qualified as films and did not have edits or lighting or a script. But we will go on. Early in his career, Mr. Krogstad was primarily known as a maverick animator, equally at ease with clay animation and dolls. Apparently there's a clay animation thing he did called Eggnog, and he animated some dolls for the Black & Decker hedge trimmer murders. So again, these were some inconsequential shorts, and he didn't really do anything with the clay animation. One controversial technique, according to the Seattle Times, was his assemblage of discarded stock footage into found art, including in his work Palm Sunday. Assembling stock footage and making some kind of postmodern thing out of it is not controversial, and it's not a technique that is new. I think Man Ray was doing that in the 20s. Mr. Krogstad had many decades-long fans and avid supporters in Seattle. His films were screened to packed houses in such high-profile settings as the Seattle Art Museum and the One Reel Film Festival at Bumbershoot. So I remember going to one of his screenings at the Seattle Art Museum, which was brand new at the time, in their auditorium there, and he had rented out the place, and it was not packed, but there were people in there, and he was showing these films that had music that he obviously didn't have the rights to. which I thought was odd. I mean, you can do that at a screening, but you can't actually release a film anywhere like that. And the One Reel Film Festival, whatever, that's a local thing. He was sometimes snubbed and dismissed, both here and elsewhere, and with good reason, because his art sucked. Sorry, Karl. It was fraudulent. He was faking it, and you can't fake it anymore in the age of the internet, and that caused his downfall. The American Film Institute, or AFI, perennially turned down his grant applications. On one notorious occasion, Mr. Krogstad was even thrown out of the AFI's building in Los Angeles for taking his time staring at portraits in the lobby, according to a 1976 Seattle Times article, which we don't have access to because we would have to subscribe to the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Times is shit. He could hit back. His Gazebo by the Sea, a mystical adaptation of a T.S. Eliot poem, ends with a dedication to the AFI for its lack of concern for the American filmmaker. The common denominator in everything Mr. Krogstad did was his expansive, colorful spirit. This is true. So here we get into the writer of this obituary is throwing out some actual facts that can be fact-checked by eyewitnesses. People loved my brother, said Greg Krogstad, who was in a high school rock band with Mr. Krogstad. He was bombastic, larger than life. He was always yelling, not in a negative way, but to get attention or make a point. He was fun to be around. He had a very creative mind. Stories about Mr. Krogstad's promotional stunts and their consequences are plentiful. In 1987, he drew the wrath of then city attorney Doug Jewett for plastering Seattle utility poles, bridges, and monorail supports with posters announcing a new film, Idiot Savant. Incredibly, Mr. Krogstad faced up to 11 years in jail, but the case was eventually dismissed, and for his trouble, Krogstad got a little more word of mouth about his film. The film is actually shit, but uninterestingly, when I first arrived to Seattle in early 1990, these posters were still everywhere a few years later. Big, giant, large format posters, black and white, that said, Karl Krogstad makes films in giant type, and then the words Idiot Savant. Although Mr. Krogstad struggled for production money, his Seattle crews were typically made up of volunteers. All right, well, we have that in common. Although when anyone worked on my projects, the first thing I always say is, this will not be a success, I cannot pay you, and this will never make any money. And so I was never lying there. In exchange for their labor, those de facto interns learned valuable marketable skills from his sophisticated operation. Okay, this is just a lie. So I don't know if this guy is a cub reporter that doesn't know of Karl, but he was famous for having these internships where he actually charged the interns as if it was some kind of school. So my friend George has this story about this guy he knew who was young and naive and volunteered to intern with Karl, and no film production ever happened during the few weeks that he interned at Karl's studios. They're just sitting around listening to Karl talk about, oh, my friend Gus Van Sant, and et cetera, and et cetera. And then at the end of the thing, Karl comes up to him and says, so, well, you think $50 is okay? And the guy's like, you're going to pay? I didn't know this was a paid thing. And Karl's like, no, you pay me for the internship. It's a paid internship. This can be corroborated by Clark Humphrey in his book Loser about the Seattle music scene. He mentions that Karl charged people to be interns. One of the volunteers was Seattle film and stage director Janice Findley, who met Karl around 1978 and co-wrote and co-starred in his 1982 film Catharsis. Mr. Krogstad turned to painting in later years. His large canvases of ethereal landscapes and startling collisions of disparate images have been on display at galleries and sold well, according to the family. None of that is true. He's a bad artist in every sense of the word. He's someone that would not know how to draw a face or especially hands. Again, he's faking it here. A lot of these baby boomers, the internet caught up to them and it was like, you mean I can't fake it and get away with it anymore because of the internet? Whatever he wanted to do, he made it happen, said his daughter, Catherine. I don't know anyone else who could say, I'm going to do this and it's done. It's magical. That could be true, but when you're doing like these low budget art projects that no one's ever going to see, there's a limit to, how the accomplishments you can brag about. He's all flash and no pan, as they say in the gold rush fields or something like that. Mr. Krogstad loved to laugh and was a force of nature. He cooked up big feasts, stayed in an expensive French hotel where artists Henri Matisse and Pablo Picasso had resided, and hosted regular gatherings with author Tom Robbins and film director Gus Van Sant. That's interesting. He must have had a trust fund or something because he didn't ever have a real job or make income from his art other than charging interns to intern for him. Never really sold any paintings. I don't know, this expensive French hotel, that's a nice thought. And they cooked up big meals. There is a picture on Facebook of Tom Robbins and Gus Van Sant and Karl. Karl's clearly dying of colon cancer at the time from a few years ago. The part about cooking is sad. If he could cook, the YouTube shows that he did that were kind of the last videos he ever did, they're still on YouTube, are pretty horrifying. It's him at a small stove cooking some kind of remedial dish and really all flash and no pan again. I mean, he might as well have been popping Pop-Tarts in there. It's very embarrassing, and hopefully someone will go see those because right now there's like 16 views on YouTube.
We used to go to where I have an outdoor wood-fired pizza oven in eastern Washington, which we can't do anymore because the property was entirely destroyed by a wildfire. And the pizza oven's still there, of course, but anything that could possibly burn around it's gone. So it's just not the garden spot it used to be. Anyway, a lot of people know me from making pizza from scratch and red sauce from scratch and the whole bit out there. But I make pizza here, and I just take a frozen pizza. And a lot of people have said, well, how do you doctor up your frozen pizzas? So I thought, okay, today we'll doctor up a frozen pizza.
Mr. Krogstad is survived by his wife, his ex-wife, and a niece. Anyway, contributions in honor of Karl can be made to Scarecrow Video. That's a great retro video store in Seattle. So there's that. And that is the Seattle Times version of reality. Hope I was some help there in disassembling what the fuck they're actually trying to say here, which is not a lot that is truthful. Karl was very supportive of my videos and stuff, and he poached a bunch of my actors, including, workers at the Lusty Lady and stuff, for his film called Great Uncle Jimmy. This consisted of Karl having a party one night and having a couple people film it and then doing some rough edits and then presenting that as a film. If you go on the Internet Movie Database, you will see that there. Karl, you soaked up the remaining amounts of our time. I will see you on the other side. Karl, you had audacity. And without that, you can't be an artist. You're not even in the starting line unless you have the ability to be a flim-flam man, a fraud, a self-promoting, boorish, brilliant, loving, genius, idiot, savant. See you next time for Seattle's Not So Swinging 60s. The Doomed Planet podcast is part of the Wild World News Network. You can find us at doomedplanet.com.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye, this is the end of the song.